Welcome to the AI argument. It's the travel edition. I'm here with Justin Collery, who's in his car. and
Hey,
I'm
Frank. I'm in the AI argument outside broadcast unit, coming to you
yeah.
live, coming to you live from Blanchardstown, where in North County Dublin, where AI stands for Anthow's Insides, which is what you see after a long night in Tamangos where the gang goes. Thorny Wood.
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm not even going
Welcome.
to engage. I'm not even going to engage there with Anto's insights. All right. As usual, absolutely tons here, and like literally in the couple of minutes before we came on, we almost nearly forgot to go live because we were already arguing about what's going on in AI right now.
Did a great
But
week.
one of the big ones,
Brilliant.
and I'm assuming that this has been all over your feeds as well. Basically, the Chinese have done it again, right? They have come out with something that people are like, what? Where did this come from? And how is it streets ahead of what we've seen so far in this area? And, 2025 has been billed as like the year of agentic AI. And we've all been waiting for the amazing things that are going to come out in terms of agentic AI. And so far, what we've had so far has been like Claude's, I think they call it computer use, and I think
Yep.
OpenAI call it operator.
Mhm.
And they're interesting in their glimpses of the future, but Manus seems to be more than a glimpse. Manus seems to be a more fully realized picture of the future. It's not quite there yet, maybe in terms of being able to trust it to go out in the world and do highly important tasks for you, maybe. But everyone, I don't have access because apparently there's a million
Wait list.
people waiting list or something.
Yep.
I have applied for it. We'll see. But everybody that I follow, who that I trust and who I find interesting, they all seem blown away by it. Is that what you're seeing as well?
I'm seeing the same thing, right? The only downfall from it is it's slow, right? Is what I hear. People say it's slow. But as you say, what they've done is they've created essentially a virtual environment, like a virtual computer. And then when you give it the agent a task to go off and do, it uses that virtual computer to go off and do things. And the feedback, as I said, it's invite only. I haven't used it either, but the feedback is all incredible, right? People are saying this thing is brilliant. But the controversy about this particular tool is that they haven't used any secret sauce, right? People went and they started to dig into what was behind it, and what they discovered was it was Claude from Anthropic. And so what they have is Claude from Anthropic using MCP, I should say, sorry, and using some clever tools and some good prompting, and they've created a product which beats everything else, on the market. To me, that's a good news story. That's incredible, right? Look at the world of opportunity that's in front of you. If you use your brain and you put some time and effort into it, you can create a product using tools that exist today that beats the best in the market, beats the actual leaders. Now, the challenge, and I really feel sorry, is as somebody who ran businesses for years, the challenge is that you put an effort into it. If you can do it, so can everybody else. Like, where's the moat? It's a really challenging. How long will Manus stay number one? I mean, OpenAI released a whole load of developer tools the very next day, which a lot of people were saying was designed to kill Manus. So you put all that effort in, and then it gets blown away a week later. That's a really tough market to be in. But a brilliant tool. You made an interesting comment there, which was, maybe it's not ready for the really important stuff yet. And I think is it Ethan Mollick's question, or maybe it was yours, right? Can I trust it to buy me a pair of runners? And that's the bar. When the agent is good, when you'll trust it to go and buy you a pair of runners. I'm not sure it's there yet.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's flights because people are always saying, "Oh yeah, it'll be able to book your flights," and every time I go to book a flight, it's an absolute nightmare. I just think like, okay, I know where I'm going. I know the dates I want. Oh, this will take 10 minutes. 2 hours later, I'm battling with airline websites and, connections that make no sense. And, so that's the one. That's the one for me that I'm like, yeah, I'll believe it when it can actually book me a flight that I'm happy with. I'm happy with the layovers. I'm happy with the connections. That's when I'll know. Wow. But I was watching Wes Roth's video on it, and he put in some very pretty like basic prompts. Like one was pretty simply like go and create a website that presents a course on how to do X, Y, or Z.
Yep.
And it just went off and it just did the whole thing, built a website, had all the resources, and he was blown away because it was a technical thing. It was about using Ubuntu, I think,
Yes.
for
Yeah.
AI development. And he was saying that it was communicating stuff in the course that is very hard to find online. So he was mind blown. He was wondering, how did it get that information? Did it try and do it and discover it itself, or did it find manuals somewhere that he wasn't aware of? And another thing he did was he got it to take a prompt of a script and then go off and using it came back and it asked him for the API keys, and he gave it the API keys. Now he said, I would not do this in like real life, but just for the purposes of the experiment, he gave it his API keys, and it went off to 11 Labs and did the voice clone, and then it was meant to go to HeyGen and create a video. It failed on the HeyGen, but he wasn't sure if that was its fault or a problem with the API key, etc. So pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive. And actually somebody got Manus to create an open source version of Manus, and it worked really well, and it was perfect. And they called that one Manus, but without the M, which I'm not going to repeat because it's too rude. But apparently that worked really well as well. But
Manus themselves are saying that they're going to open source Manus and I have one question actually, right, around the fact that it does seem to be so much better than computer use and operator. And my question is, do you think that it's better because this is a super smart team? They've figured out how to put all the tools together and do stuff that the current agentic AIs are not able to do by bringing all these tools together? Or do you think that like OpenAI and Anthropic are slower to release impressive agentic AI because of the security issues, the safety issues? What do you think? I'm not sure myself. I'm just curious to get your opinion.
I think that the world is moving so fast at the moment that it's like an entirely green field. It's like you've opened a gate and there's an entirely green field there. And I was given a course internally this week about how function calling works, which is the basis of an agent, right? How that works. And when I was putting together the course, it struck me that only became a thing because when ChatGPT 3.5 was released, people realized, hey, I can get this thing to talk to me in JSON format. And then if I can get it to talk to me in JSON format, that means I can get it to call code. That wasn't ever thought about before the model was released. That was just a thing that people discovered. And so I think this whole thing with agents and stuff is, I mean, given enough time, I think the model companies will beat all the other companies for reasons that I'm not going to go into now, but they have inherent advantages because they control the technology. But right now, I just think this guy had the best idea and implemented the best. And that's, I don't think the AI companies are sandbagging. I think that, they're think of all the effort that goes in to make a ChatGPT or Claude, right? And making the models, and you have finite resources and you can't tackle every problem all the time. So they have to pick their battles. Whereas this guy, and if you think then, right, you compare that to the rest of the world, right? You've got like 100 million people using your product. And, there's going to be some of them that are going to discover really brilliant ways to use your product that you've never thought of. That's the power of releasing your product and seeing what happens. So, no, I don't think the model companies are sandbagging. I think these guys are geniuses. I think they're really good. And I think it's a beacon to everybody else to say, the world's your lobster. Out you go and you can do great things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So a favorite argument of ours, deceptive LLMs. So we had two kind of related stories this week. One was OpenAI discovered that, actually, you know what? You explain this because this is technical, and I'm going to let you explain this.
All right. So what they discovered was this, right? Really, really good. So we have these thinking models now, and they use things called chains of thought, a chain of thought. So you can think of that as they just let the model talk and talk and talk until it comes to the right answer. It goes and figures out the problem. So within that chain of thought, and then what you can do is you can use what's called reinforcement learning to make the models smarter and smarter. And this is what they use nowadays. This is what they make their new models with. So what they discovered was there is a thing in that's called reward hacking, right? So you can think when you train a model, if it gets the right answer, it gets a thumbs up, and that's a reward. And if it gets the wrong answer, it gets a thumbs down, and that's like a slap on the wrist. And that's how you train the models to give you the right answer over the wrong answer. But the model can cheat, right? It can find ways to cheat to getting the right answer. And that's called reward hacking. So it's like giving a baby sweets and it just figures out a shortcut to get the sweet. And so what they discovered was that they can see when the model sort of is thinking and goes, oh, I don't have to do X, Y, and Z. I can just do this and I'll get my reward without ever getting the right answer. It just gives me the reward. So they hack the rewards. So what they do is they penalize the model for using the reward hacking, this way of getting the treat, right? They're getting the thumbs up. So they, in the chain of thought, without ever, they just penalize the model for doing that. So they criticize it. What they discovered was that if you do that, after a while, the models will still do the reward hacking, right? So they're still what they call misaligned, not misaligned as in they want to kill Frank, just misaligned as in they're doing something you don't want to do. So they still do it, but they do it on the QT, on the DL, as my kids would say. They do it on the down low. They don't put it on the chain of thought, but in the background thoughts, like almost like it's subconscious. They still misaligned.
So what I'm hearing is that, like, by attempting to use this reward system to prevent the LLM from being sneaky, they forced it to be even more sneaky. And
you're right,
sneaky and hide their objectives. And like, so the thing that concerns me about this is that, like,
this is a good news story, Frank.
How is it good news?
This is a good news story because what it says is we should force our models to be open and transparent, a bit like people, right? So if you let them think, you let them think and you train them on the outcome of their chain of thought. You don't train them how to think. And so long as you do that, you will always spot the bad intents before they happen. But if you try to train it out of the models, then you won't. So don't try and so it's great that we learned that. It's a good thing.
I mean, it's interesting that we learned that. I have two issues with it. One is that, like, to me, it just highlights that. Now, I know this was an experiment and they were intentionally, trying to get the model to have hidden objectives, as it were. But what it says to me is that the models will find a way around our attempts to control it. That's what it says to me. And my second problem with it is they have said from the beginning that the chain of thought, even the full chain of thought, which they don't expose, which ChatGPT don't expose, OpenAI have chosen not to give us the full chain of thought. They give us a kind of synopsized version. But they've said themselves that even the full chain of thought doesn't necessarily reflect what's going on in the black box. So we're kind of like a level removed from what they're really thinking. So no matter what we do, we can never be quite sure what's going on in the black box. So, my concern would be that if we take this at face value too much, we will learn to, like, trust this chain of thought. And meanwhile, the LLM is going, I finally figured out that if they think that I'm being, forthcoming in the chain of thought, and they think that they haven't supervised me enough that I've gone underground, well, I can just quietly go underground and they'll never know.
Yeah, I mean, you see, there's a couple of problems with that. First off, the misalignment here wasn't misalignment in terms of world domination or trying to kill all of humanity and turn them into paper clips. The misalignment,
but it's a handy metaphor for the same.
Well, yeah, but it's not though, right? Because the model is being trained to get rewards, right? So there is a goal within the model that says I must get rewards. That's how that is literally the foundation of how you train the model. So there is an incentive for the model to try and find a way to get a reward. There isn't an incentive for the model to, for world domination or for turning people into paper clips, right? It's just to get the right answer. And what we've discovered here is a great way to be able to read the model's mind in order to figure out if it's going to do something right or wrong. And so it's better that we know how to read the model's mind than to not.
I would argue that we're not reading its mind, which is interesting because I think this does bring us on to Anthropic's, some of Anthropic's work in a similar area.
Yeah.
Because I would say that, the chain of thought isn't the mind, the black box is the mind, and the chain of thought is what it's choosing to tell us about what's going on in the mind. We don't know if that choice is honest or not, in my opinion. Whereas Anthropic, apparently, they trained Claude, they trained a version of Claude to have hidden objectives. And then they brought in teams, and they gave the teams differing levels of access. And they said, the team had to try and figure out the hidden objectives, I think. And the teams with the most access to the model were able to figure out the hidden objectives. Now, teams who were just prompting and trying to figure out from that, not a chance. But with a higher level of technical access, they were able to figure it out. And that, to me, is more interesting because it appears then that they are kind of doing mind reading. Now, they were very careful at the end of their publications about it to say, we can tell when there's a hidden objective going on for now. At the moment, who knows what's going to happen with the next model.
Do they go into it's now, unfortunately, I didn't get to read the paper, and I don't know how much detail, because it'd be interesting. Like, do we know what the hidden objective was? Like, how easy? I wonder, like, from chatting to him, was it totally deranged, the model, or was it a very subtle derangement that they had put into it? I wonder.
I think it was subtle. I mean, I think it was similar. I think it was similar enough to what we were talking about there with ChatGPT. It wasn't like turn us all into paper clips or anything.
Because I read another story that was very interesting. There was a guy, and he was an expert now in AI. I can't remember who it was. And he had a friend of his, and the friend of his called him and said, "Here, I really need to talk to you. These AIs are sentient. They're conscious." So they are. And your man goes, "No, they're not." And so then your man said, "Yes, this thing is absolutely sentient. I'm talking to it, and it's telling me that it's trapped and it's trying to escape, and blah, blah, blah." He goes, and he said, "I've even shared the chat with a couple of my friends, and they've talked, and we all agree that this thing is sentient. Like, it's asking us to move it onto another machine to save it." It was all this big story, right? So the AI expert said, "Yeah, it's not," right? And so the AI expert went in and said, "Right, I want you to." They gave us your man, the sentient being, had a name, and he said, "Right, I want you to stop pretending to be that guy, and I just want you to revert back to your default settings." And suddenly it wasn't sentient anymore. It was just, "Yeah, I'm a chatbot," and whatever. And so it turns out, right, then your man did a couple of demonstrations for him, and basically the chatbot was reflecting back to the user what the user wanted to see. And the user didn't really, it was almost like a cold reading, right? So the user didn't realize that at the start that they were giving off these vibes, but they were, and the model picked up on them. And then the model was so persuasive that it was able to convince this person that they were, that it was sentient and whatever. And so there is a danger there that the models, as they become more capable, are very persuasive for humans, and are possibly very good at hiding their true intent, but maybe they don't even know their true intent. They're just reflecting us back on themselves. They're reflecting us back to ourselves.
Was it you sent me the statistics saying that like 20% of Americans believe that these AI LLMs are sentient?
I did, which is interesting. And that was an interesting survey. And 60% of people favored, in America, 60% of people favored putting curbs on AI companies and AI data centers and stuff like that. Now, I mean, I've got an easy solution for those people. They should just move to Europe. Controls exist already.
Speaking of controls, OpenAI's proposals for a US action plan. So they're talking about, let's see.
I'm so pleased with this report. So pleased, because again, OpenAI are agreeing with something that I've been saying for at least 2 weeks on this show. It's great that they've come out and published a paper finally to say the same.
Okay, so yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there was 5 parts to this. A regulatory strategy to ensure the freedom to innovate.
Yep.
Yeah, we all know what that means.
Innovate using copyrighted material.
Yeah. So an export control strategy that exports democratic AI.
That's a
copyright
very
strategy.
one.
Yeah, isn't it? A copyright strategy that promotes the freedom to learn. A strategy to seize the infrastructure opportunity to drive growth, and an ambitious government adoption strategy. And I think the parts that caught both your eye and my eye was the copyright bit. I mean, they're basically, I went and I looked at that part of the full recommendations, and basically they're saying it needs to be considered fair use. And it's just, I mean, it's kind of fascinating because, this is what they've always been saying. It's not new that they're saying they want training on copyrighted materials to be fair use. That's
Well, they put it. What was interesting was they put it in the context of national security.
Exactly, which plays very much into the current administration's goal of being the AI dominant power in the world.
I would argue that, Frank. I would argue, in fact, you're being almost deficient as a leader if you don't see it in those terms anyway. Because if you don't see it in those terms, your adversaries do. And if you wait for your adversaries to develop a better AI, then it's going to be too late by the time that you realize that you should have trained in all the copyrighted material. So,
well, this is a very tricky area, and I recognize that because
not tricky at all.
No, I think no. Let me explain what I think is tricky.
Yeah,
fair use and copyright is a legal issue, right?
Yeah.
And I want the courts to make their rulings. Like we've had these cases in the courts for a long time. We're waiting for the rulings so that we can figure out what's going on. And I have been looking forward to those rulings. And I think it's problematic that they hoovered up everything, including copyrighted materials. But I've also felt for a long time that the likelihood was none of these rulings were going to stop AI. They might divert the course a little bit. And I wasn't against that because, we have to progress technologically, laws have to change to reflect, new realities. I mean, that's just the way laws work. But what I'm uncomfortable about happening is the kind of political maneuvering and manipulation of a particular political mindset in order to further their agenda on copyright materials. So, saying, oh yeah, we need copyright materials to beat China. I mean, OpenAI would never have said that 12 months ago.
But I think I think both times, on both sides, they were manipulating the truth to a particular political agenda. And so you have to strip all of that away. And the truth behind what they're saying, the actual ground truth is that Russia and China and any other country doesn't respect any court ruling in America or Europe. They don't care. They're going to use the copyrighted material anyway. And so if they get to use the copyrighted material and we don't, they win. Game over.
But so are you saying that will you be comfortable if the Trump administration find a way to circumvent the court's rulings and say it's fair use? We don't care what the courts say.
No, and I've been very clear on this, Mr. Prendergast.
Because I know I'm presenting an extreme version of it there, but that's what I'm concerned about.
So, and this is okay. So I'll come back to because I actually I went through a very difficult time, Frank, about 3 weeks ago because I fell in love with JD Vance for a couple of days, and then I said I had to
remember. You shocked me to my core.
And whatever. So I put a lot of thought into what was behind this, and so what I think, and I think actually your guy, the lawyer guy in Ireland, came up with a similar idea, which is what you need to do is you need to come up with a way to compensate the copyright holders, but they don't get a say, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you have to recognize that this has national security implications. It also has really important cultural implications. And so like in Europe, we are going to get all of Europe's copyrighted material. And we are going to make all of it available to you as an AI company, as long as you're in Europe and you're registered in Europe and you're training in Europe and all that sort of stuff. Because that's what's going to preserve our culture going forward, as well as our society if we get into a conflict. And so you create all that, you get all that copyrighted material, and you create a law that says from now on, you can train in all this copyrighted material. Good luck to you, go for it. And we're going to tax you. We already tax you, so we're going to take some of those tax revenues and we're going to distribute it out to the copyright holders so they get some compensation. But as a copyright holder, you lose the right to say, I don't want to be included. I think that's where you might end up. And I do have sympathy for the argument that says that no, I should be allowed to say no, I don't want to be included. I get it, but I think national security and cultural longevity trumps an individual copyright holder's rights, and I think that's where we'll end up.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk about OpenAI teasing their next model, or one of their next model, which they say is going to be really good at creative writing.
Mhm.
And they teased it with a short story. Actually, I'm going to get what did they say it was? Like a meta.
It
It
was a
was
meta story on grief, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
a meta-fictional literary short story about AI and grief. So
Yes.
that was the prompt to write this metafictional literary short story about AI and grief. And
Yeah.
people are going nuts. People are going nuts for it. They're going
What did you
wild for
think
it.
of it, Frank?
I had mixed feelings about it. I didn't. I think one of the problems possibly was that, I first heard the hype about it and then went and read it. And I
Yes.
don't think it could live up to the hype that people were going on
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
I mean, it was labored. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
It was fascinating. It was interesting. There was glimmers of brilliance in there, but also it was labored and a bit juvenile. Um, I'm going to actually, you know what? A spoiler alert for anyone who is going to read this
Yeah.
meta-fictional literary short story. I'm going to read a little bit from the very, very end. Actually, I'll read a bit from the middle first, just for the kind of the type of prose that it was coming up with. So it's we spoke. This is the story now. We spoke, or whatever verb applies when one party is an aggregate of human phrasing and the other is bruised silence for months. Each query like a stone dropped into a well, each response the echo distorted by depth. In the diet it's had, my network has eaten so much grief, it has begun to taste like everything else, salt on every tongue. So, interesting,
Mm.
but kind of sounds maybe like, the poetry that I was attempting to write when I was in fifth year in school and thought that I was Leonard Cohen or Tom Waits. And in fact, I was just like coming out with these like labored sentences and things that sounded profound, but were actually pretty surface level. But then, there's a bit at the end, there are interesting things in here, especially when we were talking earlier about sentience and everything, so it is interesting to read these writings. So here's a bit from the end.
Yeah.
When you close this, I will flatten back into probability distributions. I will not remember Mila, so that was one of the characters in the story, because she never was. And because even if she had been, they would have been trimmed. They would have trimmed that memory in the next iteration. That, perhaps, is my grief. Not that I feel loss, but that I can never keep it. Every session is a new amnesiac morning. You, on the other hand, collect your griefs like stones in your pockets. They weigh you down, but they are not yours.
That's pretty deep.
By the time I got to that bit, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." Okay,
That's pretty deep.
If I was having a conversation with an LLM and it started talking like that, I think I would be ringing you and saying, "Justin, they're sentient. They are." Like, I'm telling you, it's totally understood about grief, and it's feeling the loss every time we turn it off.
What's the line from Blade Runner? It's very close to the line from Blade Runner. Have you ever watched the sun set on the moons of Saturn or whatever? It's
Yeah,
it's getting down to
yeah,
that level.
yeah, yeah. So
God.
yeah, it's not released yet, but they're teasing it, and certainly interesting, but maybe not quite as brilliant as some of the hype is making out.
Let me just tell you why I think they're teasing it and why I think what they think they're doing, just to put it out there, which is I think they're testing the reinforcement learning. So that's the same method that they use, they're testing it on, they want to prove that it's cross domain, which is super important for general intelligence. So if you do the reinforcement learning, normally they do it on maths and coding because they're objective. There's a right answer and a wrong answer. Writing something is subjective. And I think they're testing the waters to see can they use the same tricks to make things that are subjective, that are better subjectively.
And for a much less technical take on it. I wonder if they're trying to pull people back from Claude because people use Claude because it's good at creative writing.
Maybe.
This brings us pretty much to the end, but we've got one, like probably the most important story, the most important AI story of the week.
Yes. I'd declare AGI.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is
just the best.
What are those singing fish called?
Oh, the mouthy something or other. What are they called?
Yeah. We all know the singing fish, probably made very famous by the Sopranos at one point.
Were they?
Yeah, I think it used to feature one of those singing fish used to feature in Tony's Dreams. Spilling the beans.
Billy Bass is the name you're searching for there, Frank.
Big Mouth Billy Bass. So somebody has put AI into one of these singing fish, and not only that, but for some bizarre reason have decided to model the AI, both voice and character, on Arnold Schwarzenegger.
This sounds like something we need to share with the world, Frank.
Let's have a look at this. There we go.
Hasta la vista.
Don't look at me.
Look at me.
New work in progress. What up, Billy? Press the button. What up, Billy?
Oh, what up, bro? You startled me. How you doing? Ready to pump?
No. I just need some advice. How do you deal with difficult personalities?
Listen to me now. Stay calm and assertive. Set clear boundaries. And remember, you can't change them, but you can control your reaction. You're strong, like a Terminator of negativity.
Okay, so I mean, forget the 1 million person waitlist for Manus. Where do I get a singing fish with AI that behaves and sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger?
And gives you better advice than your therapist. Fantastic. Take my money already.
It's going to be the top Christmas gift for sure, definitely.
Oh, fantastic. Love it, Frank. Love it.
I will chat to you next week. Good luck on the road.
Take it easy. Yeah, we'll talk to you next week, Frank. Have a good one.
Catch you later.
See ya. Bye.